Growing up today, there is a sense of kids growing up today. There is
Pastor Raul has been teaching on Sunday mornings through Noah, and he paints the picture of like what it says about the people of that time, that every thought of the people was wicked continually. We see how a corrupt mind can bring a lot of destruction.
But it's not an emotional thing. It's like more of like a conviction thing. And today, people don't want to be convicted. They want to feel good. That's why the worship has to be a certain way, and they want a message that really appeals to their feelings right now. Like, I was talking to somebody actually yesterday about a group of young people that went here and they've left and went to another church, but it's because of that. They want the they want the seeker-friendly thing.
Anytime you get anybody in the center of your marriage, you're going to have big problems. Because then you're not giving God a chance for you and your wife to get through this whole situation you're facing, you're going through. Especially if you're a Christian, what do? You pray. You read to your wife. You ask your wife what seems to be the problems, that she's having with you, or what problems they're having with you. So what you do is you're going to sit down together and say, you know what, I'm going through this whole thing with you in my marriage. How can we change this whole thing in our marriage?
my generation of parents. I'm 32 years old, and I think they're already desensitized.
Pastor Raul has been teaching. Pastor Raul has been teaching on Sunday mornings through Noah, and he paints the picture of like what it says about the people of that time, that every thought of the people was wicked continually. We see how a corrupt mind can bring a lot of destruction.
But it's not an emotional thing. It's like more of like a conviction thing. And today, people don't want to be convicted. They want to feel good. That's why the worship has to be a certain way, and they want a message that really appeals to their feelings right now. Like, I was talking to somebody actually yesterday about a group of young people that went here and they've left and went to another church, but it's because of that. They want the seeker-friendly thing.
Anytime you get anybody in the center of your marriage, you're going to have big problems. Because then you're not giving God a chance for you and your wife to get through this whole situation you're facing, you're going through. Especially if you're a Christian, what do? You pray. You read to your wife. You ask your wife what seems to be the problems, that she's having with you, or what problems they're having with you. So what you do is you're going to sit down together and say, you know what, I'm going through this whole thing with you in my marriage. How can we change this whole thing in our marriage?
My generation of parents, I'm 32 years old, and I think they're already desensitized to a large degree because you're taught to accept it. It's become so normal, and anytime we normalize sin, we're in a grave danger. And so now, when people my age are having children, I think the great danger is to understand, like, this is a full-blown assault on the minds of children. This is all about children and grooming children to accept this lifestyle and to not understand that, like, it's really seek and destroy. That's the enemy's plot. That's always been his plot, whether it was Sodom and Gomorrah or even in the book of Romans and what was taking place in Rome at that time. The agenda of the enemy is always...
We are in the Somebody Loves You studio, and we do have a new episode, a special episode today, so make sure you stay tuned. We'll be back in 15 seconds. As I said, we are in the Somebody Loves You studio, and today we do have a special episode. I'm going to be stepping in for Pastor Raul today, and I have Eddie Franco, I have Nick Hernandez, and Moses Silva. All of them are on staff. Pastor Raul reached out to me last night. He's in preparation right now for Wednesday night. We encourage you to come out on Wednesday nights or to watch online as he goes through the book of Hebrews. And on Sunday mornings, he's going through the life of Noah, especially the times of Noah. He's been very inspired from coming back from the ark. So if you missed any of those studies, you can go to our Somebody Loves You YouTube page, and you can see all the archives. So Pastor Raul was talking last night and wanted to bring you guys through. He said, Sean, why don't you bring some of the young guys? But then he didn't mention my name. He doesn't look at me as young anymore. So he picked you guys because I wanted, because I don't really like you guys that much, except for Moses. I like Moses for sure. No, I like you guys. But all three of you guys have been on the show before. And what I want to talk about, and this is something that me and Raul were going back and forth, of the call that we have, the call of ministry. When you think about the vision that God has given to you of saying yes to ministry, and then in your own personal life. We're all friends. We're all a part of ministry. We are in different phases of our life. I watched all of you guys' testimonies a little bit through Pastor Raul. And I know, like, Moses, pursued being in the medical field. Probably is going to be a firefighter, trained as an EMT, paramedic, that world. Nick, professional dancer, correct? No, Nick, obviously you're a musician. You're a musician, an artist, but you were pursuing management and in and out. And we talk to you all the time. You grew up here as a young kid in the high school ministry. Was definitely already doing worship at that time, assisting, and then you got into the industry, a fast-paced industry, in management, and that was looking like it was going to be a life thing. You too, Eddie, like in the department world, and all those things. Like, we have our plans, but God has his. And it all comes down to hearing the voice of God in our lives. I was thinking about this before we came out in Philippians chapter 3, where Paul kind of gives his testimony. He's talking to the leaders there. It's like, basically, I was this, I was that, I had all these things. I was a Hebrew of the Hebrews, I was all of this testimony, the Pharisee of the Pharisees, but yet I count all these things as garbage, as trash, as rubbish, that I may know Christ, right? And so any of the accomplishments or any of our desires and dreams, like in the world, we're like, you know what? I'm putting these things aside that I may pursue the call of God in our lives, right? So as you said, why, Moses, first with you, why did you say yes to ministry? What was the desire when that opportunity came? Why did you say yes?
So it was, like you said, I was already a paramedic pursuing the fire departments.
Get a little closer.
So I was already pursuing the fire departments as a paramedic and just testing and seeing all that they were able to dedicate to those different areas. But I had an uncle of mine who told me, you know what, Moses, you're already attending Calvary Chapel. There's a Calvary Chapel Bible College. Why don't you take classes there? Because at that time I was thinking of going to maybe D.L. Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. So I said, oh, sure. So I signed up for Bible college classes. Pastor Didell was here. And then he got me the application, took some classes. Pastor David was one of my first teachers in the class. And I was hooked. So it was through the Bible college classes that kind of gave me a different world of cult and world religions, Pastor Dave. And then there was an apologetics class with Joe Carey. And after that, I was just hooked. I said, at least Bible teaching is something that I'd really like to enter. So it was through there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Nick, for you too, I know you've gone through different seasons. Like you were already serving a lot on Sunday morning with Sammy and the crew. You were younger at that time. You got married, went to, and got in the industry. It was working at In-N-Out, and that is a fast-paced thing, but it's a good profession as well.
Yeah.
Why did you say yes? Because I know we have been praying for that spot, and I know Pastor Raul, the same thing, and you just given that opportunity. Like, why did you say yes and no to those pursuits?
Yeah, I think what's actually funny is early on, like you said, like around 2011, 2012, and 13-ish, I was playing downstairs a lot. I was involved in ministry, and I came to this fork in the road where I was working to get married, to have a living in my life, but I also felt the call to ministry, and I was being pulled in these different directions of marriage and work and ministry. And I actually talked to Pastor Dale, and I told him, I was like, look, Dale, I'm just being torn. I don't know what to do. And he said, you know what, I want you to pray for 3 things. I want you to pray for a job to open up somewhere else that's a 9-to-5, weekends off, that you'll be able to be here. I want you to pray that a job would open up here where you can take care of all those things, ministry, a living, and your wife. Or I want you to pray for peace at In-N-Out, where you're at. And I prayed those things for 2 months, day and night, all the time. And at the end of those 2 months, I couldn't deny that God was calling me to In-N-Out, away from ministry. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand what he was doing at the time. I didn't understand why he would take me away from ministry, something that we should want to do, something that you're supposed to want to give your life to. I just couldn't understand it. And people really couldn't either. I had a lot of questions, why aren't you at the church? What are you doing? What's going on in your life? And it was very confusing for me. And so for those times, for those years that I pursued and pursued management, there was actually a surrender and a point of time where I said to the Lord, if this is what you want from me, to be here forever for the rest of my life, to raise my son and to raise my family, being a manager, then I will let go of everything, and I will do what you want me to. I just want peace in my heart now. I just don't want to be torn of like, what am I doing in my life? And it was in that moment where the Lord allowed me to be in ministry. It was when I surrendered that the Lord gave me the opportunity. And so I would say that I didn't I didn't necessarily say yes. I said yes to the Lord. I said, whatever you want, Lord. And then he gave me the opportunity for ministry. So that's my story.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Eddie, kind of the same thing. You know, I'm sure that you had your idea of what that looked like, right? Like being in a department store, being like in management, like having vision for that industry, that world. God gets a hold of your life, and then your perspective starts changing. I know you started here in the bookstore, and you're still growing, you're still developing, you're seeing what God has for you. But it's a big shift. What caused the shift?
You know, it's kind of unfortunate to say this, but you know, when God called me, I had nothing left, and I think for me, God really broke me down to the point where it's unfortunate to say that I made him my last resort, but he was there, he was faithful, and he was there ready to pick me up, ready to restore me, and when he gave me that calling, like I love how Pastor Raul describes it. It's a fire that just burns in your heart, and you know what? It's not something that happened right away. It wasn't, but I did know that the Lord was calling me to the ministry, just because I had nothing left, and I was so broken that all I had was the Lord, and that is the perfect place to be, to really hear from God, is when you're just broken and all you have is God there to cry out to. And so that's what I did, and I remained faithful in the little things, and just attending service as much as I can, being here as much as I can, because I knew when I was in the world, coming back to the Lord, I was lacking fellowship, I was lacking reading, I was lacking prayer. So I wanted to, I felt the fire burning in my heart for prayer, for reading, and for fellowship. So I was just being faithful in that. And the Lord just went before me, and he honored that, and he just started opening the doors. But when I first got asked to be in the ministry, I turned it down because, you know, it was a part-time job. It was a huge pay cut. And then when I got asked again, I saw it as an impossibility. I was like, this is impossible. It's a 60% pay cut for me, coming from a good career at Nordstrom, a good career with AAA at selling insurance. It was good money, and it was an impossibility, but I love the fact that it was an impossibility, because that's how you know it's the Lord. Is when you take a step of faith, and that's when the Lord honors that. It reminds me of the children of Israel, how when they were going to cross the Jordan, the water didn't split until they put their foot in the water, and that's when the water split for them. And so and it's cool because the Lord always asks for just one step of faith. You know, that one step of faith, he honors it, and your faith begins to grow, and you just begin to trust him. So that was my biggest thing, is I had nothing left. He was my last resort, and he was there ready to restore me, and he brought me into ministry, and he gave me the calling to be a pastor, and he's been opening the doors, and it's just being faithful in the little things that he has you for me.
You know, it's interesting how the call of God, it's different for each one of us, right? And it's different seasons, it's different processes along the way. Sometimes it's in various pursuits, like you know there's a desire that's in your heart, but it doesn't line up as you think it should at the time, and then years go by and things change. You look at like Moses. I was thinking about this, like Moses being in Egypt for 40 years, and then he is expelled to the wilderness for 40 years, and he most likely thought that was going to be the end of his life. That's how it was going to be. He's going to have his kids, he's going to have his wife, he's going to be a shepherd, and he'll stay there. He doesn't want to be caught up in the nonsense anymore in Egypt. He had to escape there, and yet God had other plans. Like, God works in our lives, like, as he is breaking us, because it's not about us. Like, ministry's not about us. A lot of times what God does is he strips us of a lot of things that we might walk in humility and see things for what he desires us to see them, like a servanthood ministry. I look at Pastor Raul, and we know his story. Like, he's a kung fu master. His thing was martial arts, and that was probably going to be his pursuit. It was his business at that time. And when God was kind of tugging on his heart, as things were showing that like God was opening an opportunity without striving, God changed directions in his life. And it really comes down to this personal relationship. And then you're just obedient to the call. He takes care of the results. You know, all of us are from different backgrounds. For me, I was in the construction world and painting and being like an overseer of projects and stuff, and close to the guy as well. You have guys that, like, that's their job, that's their profession. Some of those guys have a vision. They make a lot of money in that world. Myself, I couldn't deny that those things didn't allure me. They didn't move me. And especially when God got a hold of my life, and you're coming here on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights or the various times, and you have this stirring in your heart to be used by God, you just don't actually know what it is. Yeah. And so let's talk about that for a little bit. Like, we have our mindset of what ministry is from the outside, then we're here, God starts moving. What is from your perception of what ministry would be to what it really is at this point, Nick?
Yeah, I think everything that you said is, it's just dying to yourself. It's ministry is not about you. It's not about what you can gain. It's not about you moving up in some sort of ladder,
like
or
ladder.
Yeah, it's none of that. It's just being selfless. And I think from looking at the outside perspective, part of my struggle for the years when God called me away from the ministry, part of my struggle was, what am I doing? Like, I feel like I'm living a life and trying to move up a ladder of a company, of a corporate ladder, and being in management and things like that. Like, and that's awesome. That's great to do. But in my heart, I knew that I was called to ministry. So in the meantime, I feel like I'm living two different lives. Like, I feel like I'm being raised up in a corporate world, but at the same time, like, I'm not serving the Lord. And when I look back now, one of the greatest things that gives me comfort when I go through trials now is that I wish when I was in those situations and those trials back then, I wish I would have just learned from the Lord. I wish I would have just learned the lesson that the Lord was trying to tell me, whether it was being faithful, whether it was correcting somebody, whether it was, holding my tongue in arguments and things like that, because all that, takes place. And I wish I would have learned those lessons to take care of my family, to invest more there, to have joy. I was going through a lot of depression at the time because I felt my life was just two different people. I didn't feel like I was doing what I was made to do. And when I look back, I wish that I would have trusted the Lord. I wish I would have been with the Lord. And kind of like what you said, Eddie, about just like the Lord was your last resort. I feel like I was in that same situation where the Lord was my last resort, and the Lord had to show me. Now I look back and I think how foolish I was when I had the Lord, and I wish I would have learned those lessons then. And so that's what I would say to somebody who's desires to be in ministry, and they think that the way to be in ministry is, well, I need to be in ministry. I need to strive to get there. And it's like, you need to just learn your lessons where you're at. You need to learn those lessons, so then when God says, because only God opens the door, and then when God opens that door, you've already learned all your lessons and you're ready, So that's my experience.
Moses, I have a question. As far as talking about your desire, the pursuits that you had, like in the world, basically in the medical field and now you've been here for a little while now. How many years have you been here?
Since 2017, December of 2017.
2017. How does the Lord just grant you peace? Like, this is the place that God has called you to, and not pursuing those other things. I know you get used. I mean, you always have your bag ready to go if somebody needs help, right? But how do you keep that balance, knowing that this is where God's placed you versus battling with what could have been or what could be in the future? Do you know what I'm saying?
One of the individuals that I was serving with at church was, I didn't know, but he was an assistant chief at one of the cities nearby here in the fire department. And a week before I had met with him, I already had made the decision that, I'm gonna go to Bible college, and I really want to pursue missions trips, being a missionary. And so when I was speaking with him, he was showing me with the first aid ministry, here's the fire extinguisher, here's the first aid kit. And after we were done, we just talked a little bit more. He says, are you still trying to pursue the fire department? I said, you know what, no, I'm not anymore. And he says, you know what, I'm the assistant chief, and a lot of people on the application fill out morals and ethics, so you get hired on, but they're not like that after they're hired on. And he says, but you don't know who I am, and he told me who he was. And he says, I would have grabbed your application if you said yes and put it right on the top. And that's kind of how it is in that world. It's who you know. And so I kicked myself on the way when I was walking away. I said, am I making a mistake? And then it happened 2 other times, a fire captain and another engineer from different cities. When we would go out to different classes for evangelism or something, they'll say, you have a desire for the Bible very well, and good morals and character. And this is outside, right? This is outside of the field of trying to get hired on. He says, man, we're hiring next week 6 people. It's only in-house. And we would grab your application and we would put it right on top because it's authentic in a sense. It's not just on paper, but this is who you are. So I had to be able to say no to each one of them and be satisfied that I'm still coming to Bible college and I'm still pursuing it, knowing that there's a wait of time. In other words, it would take another 8 years for the Lord to open the opportunity to come on staff. So for 8 years, you're just waiting and serving the Lord voluntarily and non-paid. And even they tell you that in the fire department, if you can't do this job for free and wake up and do everything, because there's a lot of volunteer fire departments outside of California, he says, then don't even continue on in this career. Because if you can't wake up and do it for free, he says, okay, let's serve and volunteer at the church. Let's get involved. So I was able to say no to those 3 opportunities and be happy with it. Almost have a freedom of saying no, I'm okay with the pursuit that I have, and that is to go on into the mission field. So
that's awesome. What I love about that is what you see is really the sovereignty of God in our lives. Like God prepares us in ways that never thought possible. Pastor Raul, a lot of times he gives example of what he learned in the military, like his discipline and stuff like that. He wasn't walking with God at that time. Like in the military, people were praying for him. But there are characteristics and traits that he learned from that have been used like in ministry, discipline, being on time, and all that work ethic. All that kind of stuff is instilled. We see it in the Bible. David was prepared as a shepherd. He was taking care of sheep that wouldn't listen, that needed to be guided, that needed to be protected because God was preparing him to be a king someday. There's a lot of, you think of, I was reading a story in D.L. Moody the other day. He was a salesman, right? He was a salesman, and he was a shoe salesman, and he had a desire for money and being successful and being invested. He knew the importance of, if you're going to be productive in the sales industry, you have to be all in. You have to be focused. You have to have this customer service and be able to talk and communicate. And he put all that effort in for financial gain. When God got a hold of his life, and his conviction was like how he served in the world, how much more should he be serving the Lord with that same fervency, with that desire for souls, that desire to preach, the opportunities that are all around. And what Moses is saying right now kind of like sparks that too. Is like, I like what he said. Like, if you aren't able to do this for free, then you're going to be challenged because ministry isn't a job; it's a calling. And it's different. People don't get it. People don't fully understand. There are a lot of blessings in ministry, but there's also a lot of testings. In that industry that I worked in from young, I worked hard physically a lot. Like, working hard physically has always been something that's kind of, I can excel at. When it comes to ministry, other things, there's different areas. Sometimes you work physically, but there's mental warfare, there's spiritual warfare, there's other things that you go through that can be tough, that can be draining. And it has to be led by the Spirit of God. It's something that you cannot do in the flesh. And so it is an amazing opportunity. Eddie, you seem like you wanted to add something before I with Moses. Was something you were going to say, or do you remember? Well, let me set you up for this, because I thought I cut you off. Let me set you up for this. When now being in ministry, because you're the youngest as far as being time frame, like in ministry right now. what is God doing in your heart? Like the Bible said, well, not the Bible, the guy does kind of say it, but there's a saying that Pastor Raul has said a lot, and Chuck Smith has said, you only have one life and it will soon be past, and all that you do for Christ will last. That perspective, like you have a calling upon your life. There's a conviction to say to yes to ministry. Here I am. How does that drive you? Recognizing like you don't know how long you're going to be in ministry. You don't know how many years you're going to be alive. None of us do. Talk about the obedience of just staying in a closer relationship with God in ministry.
Yeah. For me, just being obedient to the Lord is again just what we've been talking about. Just denying ourselves and just the Holy Spirit. Once the Holy Spirit comes into your life and starts giving you the wisdom and starts teaching you more about who God is. When I look back at my life, I don't desire that anymore. I don't desire. Yes, sin is fun, and you know what? We're living in a day that it's as Pastor Dale said. I heard him say it's getting a lot easier to sin, and it's pleasing your flesh. But when I look back at it, after being with the Lord and fully committing my life to Him, when I look back, it just disgusts me, and it grosses. Like it's nothing that I would ever want to go back to. So whether it's in ministry, wherever the Lord calls me, I just want His will in my life, and I've made that commitment to fully surrender my will to His will, and just being led by the Spirit. So wherever the Holy Spirit leads me, wherever the Lord leads me, that's where I'm going to give my full heart to, and that's just an attribute about being a disciple of Christ. I love how Jesus rebukes the multitude in Luke 14. How he, I feel like if Jesus were here today, he'd rebuke a multitude of people in the church, because they're not willing to let go of this world to follow Christ. And that was my biggest thing, and that's why I love the fact that when I was called to ministry, it was impossible. I had to let go of a lot of things. I had to let go of some impossible things, and the Lord made it possible. So there's no going back for me. It's ministry till I die. I love how Raul says that it's ministry and it burns in your heart, and it's ministry till we die. And that's my calling, and when God gives you that calling, that's the fire you have, and just being a disciple, a true disciple of the Lord.
Pastor Raul has said this many times. He said it to me early, and I've heard him echo it to many others. He said, you stay simple, you stay humble, and know God's word, and God will use you powerfully. Stay simple. Okay, a lot of times we can be analytical, make things more confusing than they need to be. Humble, very important. God starts using your life. You don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. You look at what Paul says. When you do a study on the gifts of the Holy Spirit in Romans 12, 1 Corinthians chapters 12 through 14, and Ephesians 4, in all three of those instances, in the midst of talking about the gifts, there's always an exhortation to a call to humility at the same time. It's so interesting. And it's something for us to always realize as well. And that leadership is kind of emulated here in ministry with Pastor Raul, Pastor Dale, of servanthood ministry. God doesn't need you, doesn't need any of us here, doesn't need me to do ministry. God gives us the opportunity. He gives us the gifts and the talents to fulfill the tasks that are at hand. But the glory should always be to the Lord, not to ourselves, right? And so for us, there's always an exhortation recognizing the spiritual warfare that we all face, right? The enemy wants to discourage us. And that's why we're always exhorted on our spiritual life. We're exhorted on our devotional life or our prayer life or that consistency, being aware of that. You guys are in different seasons of your life right now. Like Moses has been, how long have you been married, Moses?
Oh, man, put me on the spot. No, since 2018, so that's 4 years now.
4 years, have one child. Nick, same thing. How long have you been married? Let's see if you mess this up.
Oh, man. I'm sorry, babe. I love you. I've been with her since 2013, so that's 9 years together. We got married in 2017, so that's 5 years.
Okay.
Wow.
All right, there you go. And I know Eddie is engaged right now. And so they're in different seasons of life right now. That being said, I talked to your wives and your fiancés, so I got a couple questions from them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. You know, I say that because everything's connected. Our ministry is connected to our home life, to our personal life. It has to be the same. Moses, as far as, and I know you love being married, you love your daughter, your wife is amazing. She's been one of our teachers for our kids, and she's phenomenal. How are you guys staying united in ministry, the call, and why is that so important?
So how we're united in ministry. So she and I was actually praying last night.
And she was on staff.
Yeah, so
at one time,
she was on staff here, and then we met in Bible college, and one thing that was really unique is that she loved the Lord first before we found love. She was married to the Lord first. The Lord was her father. The Lord was her friend. So everything she had was already with the Lord. She was totally satisfied in Christ. So I just came more like as the runner. I'm going to run her down the longest aisle, which is called life, to hand it over to her husband, Jesus. And that's my duty here on earth, is to do that. So when it comes to that, is she already had a desire for missions. She's already was serving in ministry. So when I came alongside her, and then she came alongside me, we were already serving. So we kind of just came together, and we both like teaching. So now she serves in Christian education, and in myself with the Bible college. So I would say it became easier by the fact that we both were already serving the Lord before coming together.
Wow. You and your wife, Celeste and Nick, have been together for a long time, like you said, known each other since you guys were younger, married, young child now, fast-paced ministry. We talk just finding that balance and everything. It's a very important thing.
Yeah.
It's very important to have transparency. I remember before I got married, and my wife too was already on staff before I was, and she was around ministry before I was. But when we started talking, and I knew where God was leading me. I know He put a call upon my life. I wasn't a pastor at that time, but I was doing ministry in that realm. Like, I was starting to teach. I was starting to be used. You saw the gifts that I had. And I remember telling her, like, we have to have good communication, because I trust in the Lord, like, to speak through me. I don't look at myself as the most intellectual person in the world. I don't look at myself as the most gifted person in the world. I want to be blameless. I want to be able to speak with power when I'm on stage, or I'm in the pulpit, or I'm ministering to somebody, I'm praying with somebody, that we're good.
Yeah.
Because there's warfare.
Yeah.
Why is there's a need for that? And it's a work in progress. Like, what is God teaching you as far as ministry and marriage and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the things that we go through are obviously the spiritual battle. Where I'm at in ministry is fighting a spiritual war. We worship, we praise, and people have burdens, they have needs, they have things in their life that they want to cry out to God and to worship and to praise Him, but their circumstance might be too heavy or might be too blinding to see the Lord. And the Lord allows my wife and I to experience those things, so we can share the burden. And so my wife and I have never experienced those things before, because that's not what the Lord had for us at the time. But now that we're here, and now that we're in ministry, we go through a tremendous amount of warfare. And rather than fighting battles against each other, we need to fight in the spiritual realm. And so our battles have just been they've been cured, and they've been fought just with His word. I mean, we have to be surrendered to His word and washed by His word and cleansed, because the enemy just wants to attack us and our son and our home. And so I've learned a tremendous amount of just trusting in His word, and just allowing it to wash us both. So
Yeah.
I think that we, you know, there's a tremendous amount of communication, like you said, too, just being one and just trying to, you know, find the balance in life. You know, as I said before, I feel like in my job in past, I had more time to be, you know, take vacations or to take things or to do whatever. And so now that we're here, it's a lot more demanding, very fast paced. And so since that's the case, God has allowed me to enjoy the time that we have and to take a new perspective of like, hey, you know what? Enjoy the time that you have, like number your days, you know? And so I think a lot of those things like come into play. It's doesn't make sense on paper, you know, ministry just doesn't make sense, but it does with the Lord. Like you have to surrender, you have to give all to the Lord. And so that's just some of the things we're learning.
Yeah, you know, what's amazing too is like God is faithful in our lives. Like he will direct our steps. And when it comes to there's the two biggest decisions you'll ever make in life is number one, what are you going to do with Jesus? Accept him, reject him. 2, who are you going to do life with? Like get married to and stuff. Very important because those things will dictate the direction of your life in a lot of ways. If you're called to ministry, you have to be on the same page with your spouse because you want to be in unity. You understand like the call of ministry, what it looks like, because you have to. And that's what I learned that continually. My wife learns that continually because you go through different seasons. And the kids grow. Like my kids are growing. You guys know, like they're growing quick. You know, 13, 11, and almost 8 right now. And so it goes really fast. And she does a lot. And we pray to kind of keep that balance. You know, you have to continue to pray. You have to be led by conviction. You got to know when you're right, when you're wrong. Sometimes you're not always going to hit the mark 100%, but there's always times to learn and to grow. For you, Eddie, your fiance, I've known since she was a young girl, and watching what the advantage that is that she understands ministry from a perspective and the call and why it's so important. So as far as that, speak to that a little bit. How is that an advantage, I would say, or how is that a blessing as you pursue the calling of God, knowing that your soon-to-be wife in the near future has this grasp and understanding of ministry?
Yeah, that's a huge blessing for me, and the fact that she understands ministry, and the biggest thing is just godliness in her life, and there's a lot of things where like me coming from the world, and you know, I was raised Christian, but I did about 8 years just reject the Lord and just went back into the world, and recently coming back from the world and just coming back from that lifestyle, it's been difficult to connect as far as like my lifestyle and her just being raised in the ministry, raised in the church. So there's a lot of times where I personally need to humble myself and in a way submit, because there's we learn from each other. I'm learning from her, she's learning from me, and I'm learning to be that godly man in her life. I'm learning to be just being led by the Lord in this relationship. And I've made a lot of mistakes. You know, we all make mistakes, and she's been by my side, and she's been right there ready to help me. You know, even like some of her words are just full of wisdom too. It's like it's just not it's not like anything new that I haven't heard, but it's just reminding me, being blameless. And I love that she keeps reminding me that. And I think it's cool because we're able to hold each other accountable. Especially me, just being a little newer in the Lord, and this is my first time dating as a Christian. Trying to be blameless in this relationship, and Satan's always attacking because he's always going to remind you of those things that you loved when you were in the world, and that he's always going to try to bring that lust that desires, those desires of your flesh back in your life. But when I look at her and I see how pure and blameless she lives her life, it just motivates me to just love her and respect her and present her wholly on the altar when I'm there. And I just wanna make sure that when I present her on the altar, she's pure, and she's just, it's like just that sacrifice to the Lord that I'm willing to make, because I love her, and at the end of the day, Christ comes first in my life. So if it means just living that blameless life, holding each other accountable, that's where my blessing is.
Perfect. Guys, just in wrapping up right now, as we talked about ministry, we talked a little bit about our personal lives, relationships, and then now we're looking in the future, what God has for us. Now, we know that God holds the future in his hand. We don't know what happens next week, but he does. He knows what's going to happen next year or 5 years or 10 years. But I know our desire is to serve the Lord in the future. We're raising children in a crazy, ungodly world. We're doing ministry in a crazy world. There's a lot of needs in this world. We have to be led by the Spirit of God. So in the midst of the different challenges, in the midst of ministry itself, what keeps you going with hope, Moses, and a vision for the future? What is your motivating factor?
It was at Pastor Raul in the staff meeting yesterday. He spoke to us, and he was talking about faithful Noah. He's on the Sunday series with that. And also he spoke about faithful Abraham. And as I was looking at Hebrews chapter 11, and it was speaking about Abraham, it says, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. And it says that he dwelt in the land of promise as a foreign country, dwelling in tents with his children. And it says that he waited for the city whose foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So there's a almost kind of like God hands or holds over the carrot in front of the horse to move him. God holds to each one of us as believers the same thing, because in the summation of it all, it says, these all died in faith, in verse 13 of 11. Now having received the promises, pretty much God promised them he was going to give them something, but they didn't receive it on earth, but it kept them motivated to keep going. But having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embracing them, and confessed them that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. So it's almost as if we're all on a race, right? Timothy tells us we're on a race, and we're all being moved and directed to something. So for me, Bible college drew me to this chapter that we're in life. The Lord drew me to be able to be on staff, and the Lord drew me to my wife. So the Lord kind of draws the people. He puts the cookie crumbs on the floor for you to pick at. And he's the master fisherman. He puts the right bait on the hook. So for me, the heavenly hope, knowing that this is all going to be temporal, pain, sufferings, discussions, arguments, difficulties, long hours, changes of schedule, all of that's going to be stopped at one point in time. We're going to be at peace. We're going to enter his promise, which he says later on in that chapter, because we kept our hope in him. And that is where I put my hope. And I put my hope in that there is something more than just what is in this world.
Nick, what is your drive and purpose right now in ministry going in the future with, like I said, the challenges? Obviously, you oversee the worship ministry, but what is your desire right now?
Yeah, I'd say very similar. I mean, God has orchestrated our lives. He has led our lives, and he knows what's best clearly. And so just surrendering to him and surrendering to his will has been a tremendous drive for me, just to trust that he knows what's best, just to trust that he knows how to lead my family, how to lead my wife, how to protect my home, how to lead the ministry. This is God's ministry, not mine. Like you said earlier, God would go on, this ministry would go on without us. God doesn't need to use me, but that he chooses to is amazing. I like what you said about the exhortation of just being humble. Ephesians 4 verse 2 says, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace, and just knowing that God is just moving in our lives, that's what He wants for us. It's an awesome motivation to worship the Lord and to see people worship the Lord. It's awesome motivation to see my life as a husband, as a father, change, and to see God like, hey, that part of your heart, like, that's not right. Like, oh my gosh, man, you're still like changing me, you're still growing me, like, awesome. Like, I want to see what you're gonna do. And in my wife, I mean, the amazing things that He's done in her, and now I have a son, and now I want to see what God will do through his life, and just trying to number my days. So just having that hope and that perspective on the Lord, just that He is the author and the finisher of our faith. So super excited.
Awesome. Eddie, same thing, like being in ministry, having drive, having vision. What is your desire right now, like in ministry as a whole?
So right now, my desire, the burden that the Lord's really placed on my heart, and where I'm really praying for vision on, is discipleship and making disciples of all nations. Mm-hmm. And that's the verse that really spoke to me. And as right now, as the Lord's opened the door for me to oversee new believers, I think that's huge, to be able to start them off with true discipleship and being a disciple, and there's a lot of new things that I'm working on in finding ways to make disciples, and I think I'm just gonna stay in His Word and just be praying about it, because it burdens me from all the churches nowadays and a lot of just watered down Christians and churches that teach a watered down gospel, and Christians nowadays just want their ears tickled in the churches, and it grieves my heart, because like that verse when Christ says like there are many who will call me Lord, and there are many who will prophesy in my name, but when I'm face to face with them, I'm going to say, depart from me, you who workers of iniquity. And that's a serious verse, and that really burdens me, because there's a lot of people right now that think they're following Christ, and they're being taught this prosperity gospel, and it breaks my heart. So my thing is, when the Lord called His disciples to make disciples of all nations and teach them what I have commanded you. Don't suggest what I have told you. Teach them things that I have commanded you. And I think that's something that I really want to implement into the new believers especially. And then overseeing the welcome booth as well. There's just so many opportunities to be able to connect with people that are just spiritually starved. Mm-hmm. Those new people that are coming through, coming from other Calvary chapels. I'm not saying everybody is, but it all it takes is that one person that you can really just, exhort and equip and just build that discipleship in their life.
Thanks for sitting down. Like I said in the beginning of this episode, we were really just talking about the call of God. Each one of us has a specific call. I love the Bible in Psalm 139, where David reflects on the goodness of God. And he says that the days are, when I was in my mother's womb, you had the days fashioned before there was one day. That God knows our lifespan. He knows everything about our lives, when we take our first breath, when we take our last. And in between there, God gives us the opportunity to understand who He is. In the book of Acts chapter 17, where Paul is giving this message, that's what he says. He's giving you this span of time that you may repent and come to the saving knowledge of Christ. Then, because of His mercy and His grace, then He gives you opportunity to be used by Him in the midst of that. And the rest of that time, it is just aligning your will with God's will. God's will in our lives. And when we are submitted to God's will, He will direct our steps for the rest of our lives. Whatever that looks like in ministry, things are ever changing. You guys are going to see it. Like your kids grow, things change, seasons change. God never changes. And when you have the peace of God, when you're led by the Spirit of God, He will do things that only He can do. We can't do it in the flesh. We have to do it in the Spirit. Yeah. And that goes the same for all those that are watching online. Pray what God has for you. Let God use your life. Continue to pray for Pastor Raul and the ministry. If you've missed any of the Straight Talk episodes, go to our Somebody Loves You YouTube. Make sure you subscribe so you can be notified when new episodes drop. And then also you can look at many of the archives of Pastor Raul's Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings, a lot of teachings. And make sure you download the Somebody Loves You app where you can get all of Pastor Raul's library, and go to somebodylovesyou.com for the local radio listings and all the opportunities you have for this ministry to bless you and your families. Take care, and God bless.